President Biden says he would meet with Russia's president, but only under one condition. We'll tell you what that is. Plus, Abbott Elementary writer Brittani Nichols joins me to talk about working on the Emmy winning comedy series. And we get confirmation on the sexuality of one of the main characters in Knives Out. That's all coming up on Advocate Today. Hi, welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. We're going to get right to today's stories. President Biden says that if Vladimir Putin wants to meet with him, it would have to be over the release of Brittani Griner. And it could happen at next month's G20 summit in Indonesia. The meeting will bring together leaders from 20 nations. Biden hopes the meeting can serve as a platform to discuss the release of basketball superstar Brittani Griner. Griner was sentenced to 9 years in Russian prison for having a cannabis vape cartridge at Russia's airport. The U.S. government says Griner is being wrongfully detained and used as a pawn in Russia's war with Ukraine. A prisoner swap is currently on the table, but no movement on that so far. Griner's team is appealing her 9-year sentence. Turning to entertainment, a rising star in Hollywood is making an impact on visibility through comedy. Brittani Nichols is a queer producer, actor, and writer, and currently works on the Emmy-winning comedy Abbott Elementary. I had the privilege of speaking with Brittani about her work on the series, creating queer storylines, and more. I wonder if you would just start by giving us a little bit of your background and how you broke into this business, which is not easy.
Sure. Yes, I'm originally from Chicago, the oldest of seven, actually. And I did not have any idea that Chicago was known as a comedy town. It wasn't until I was living in the Bay Area after I graduated college that I sort of started to put the pieces together about uh, possibly being able to have a career in comedy. And once I figured that out, I picked up and moved to LA, where I was a production assistant to start things off just to, make enough money to stay in town. And then I started performing at UCB. I was doing stand up, improv, sketch comedy, really just every lane of comedy possible. I was really trying to drive in. And I ended up doing a web series called Words with Girls. Issa Rae independently produced a half-hour version of that. And then that is what led to me being in my first comedy room.
This town has not always been incredibly welcoming to queer and Black folks, and especially to our stories, queer stories, especially. And I wonder if you would talk about any challenges that you faced in telling those stories.
I started my career at a time where people were starting to tell those stories a little bit more than they had been. We were getting the opportunity to be the main characters in some of these stories. And a lot of that was pushed to the side, sort of on streaming. If you look at some of my credits, it was on like Facebook Watch and CISO, because it was like sort of these smaller platforms that were willing to take risks, quote unquote, by telling these stories. And it's because the creators of those shows are specifically looking for people that could speak to those issues and to those identities, that I think helped me find my footing in the industry.
I love that you wrote on Black Lady Sketch Show, and you also appeared in an episode. I think it was your character name was like Grill Daddy or Barbecue Daddy or something.
Yes, my two roles, the X and Barbecue Daddy, I would think sum me up pretty well.
I love it. Would you talk a bit about working on that series, which is so funny, so deeply, deeply funny?
Yeah, it was nice, honestly. I have to say that just being able to write for a world where everyone was Black was just a unique experience. Like,
Mm.
so much of the comedy that we, I think, as queer people and as Black people write, it requires us to other ourselves. It requires us to make fun of the fact that we are othered or treated poorly. And in that room, when it's a world full of just Black people, you don't have anyone there to other you. And so it allowed, I think, us as writers to just genuinely find the different points of view that exist within the sphere of Black people and Black women specifically. And it allowed us to tell jokes that we wouldn't get to tell in other situations, which is really nice.
Great. Well, thank you. And you're currently writing on just this incredible breakout show, Abbott Elementary, which won a couple of Emmys earlier this year. And you recently had an episode that you wrote. And I don't want to read too much into it, but I do feel as though it was speaking to me in little ways, like in terms of getting some queer stuff in there. Like you had Diva Cheryl Lee Ralph got to sing for one thing, and Janine Quinta Brunson's character made a lesbian joke, and then I thought overarchingly with Melissa's storyline, kind of teaching Janine to cook, and the whole thing with her sister, the kind of feud that they've been having that in some ways it touched on a little bit of chosen family. I mean, yes, these are her colleagues, but I felt like that was part of it. And if I'm wrong, I apologize, but I wonder if you would weigh in on trying to bring a little bit of that into the show that is obviously already really open.
Oh, I think you are right, nailing it on the head. This show is very much about chosen family, and it's about, how our fraught uh, family dynamics inform a lot of the things that we do, including your work. I think that in a place like Abbott, where you are forced to depend on your coworkers more than possibly at other places because of the failures of the system that you're all coexisting in, you sometimes do have that work family, which is, a term that in the first season we see them balk at. And it's sort of a thing where it's like, yeah, even if you're saying this isn't what's happening, it is what's happening, and you might not like it, but that's the situation that's being forced upon them. And as a queer writer, it's nice to see. I think something that the queer community has embraced so much.
The show is so deeply funny and heartfelt. It's also taking on this incredibly massive problem, which you mentioned, the system and the failure of the system, of the public school system to support its teachers, mainly, and how that affects the students. I mean, the teachers are really a buffer so that the students still learn. And yet the show is not at all like eating vegetables.
Quinta Brunson, the creator and star of the series, is always story first. There's also this opportunity for the audience to learn. A lot of these issues that they're being confronted with, people might know exist, but they might not. I think a lot of people know sort of in the abstract that our public education system has its shortcomings and that it's not being funded in the way that it should be. But what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, how that impacts people every single day of their lives, how it impacts students, that's something that I think might be left to the imagination if you don't currently have a actual lived experience with it.
Would you talk a little bit about Emmy night? Because Cheryl Lee Ralph won. She was the first Black woman to win in her category in like 35 years or something. It was Best Supporting Actress in a Comedy, which is absurd and obscene. But so happy for Cheryl Lee Ralph. And then Quinta won for writing. I'm just going to say, not so off the record, I was pulling for Abbott Elementary for the big prize.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely.
Emmy night was incredible. I think that a lot of us were nervous. It was so many of our first time getting to go to the ceremony or being nominated. And so it was a lot of us just looking at each other, being like, "Wait, what do we do? When do we go to our seats?" And so to come away from that, getting to witness those two wins. I mean, our entire table was in tears. We also got to sit at a table. They don't let us sit with the actors. Writers too ugly, I guess. So they put us sort of in the back of that first row of that first area. So we just were all just in tears, truly just like grabbing each other. It was really a really wild moment, a really interesting way to start off the show. And I think for a minute, we all looked at each other and be like, okay, Cheryl's saying this, either everyone's going to be the most on board anyone has ever been, or this is going to go south quickly. And we just sort of were braced for either situation. And when people were into it, we were like, yes, good, thank you, great. Standing ovation, correct.
Exactly. Thanks so much to Brittany for stopping by. I'm excited to see what she does next. You can catch my full conversation with Brittany on advocatechannel.com. And finally today, Knives Out director Ryan Johnson is confirming the sexuality of his lead character. Daniel Craig's Benoit Blanc is in fact queer. Johnson confirmed Blanc's sexuality at a press conference during the London Film Festival. Knives Out 2 Glass Onion features a scene that briefly shows Blanc with a male lover. When Johnson was asked about the scene and if Blanc was queer, he simply said yes, he obviously is. Knives Out Glass Onion will have a whole new cast and it hits theaters on November 23rd. It's wonderful to see more visibility like this in our TV shows and movies. That's all the time we have for this Advocate today. For more content and coverage, the Advocate channel is streaming now on Roku, Fire TV, Apple TV, and Android TV. You can also download our app on your Android or Apple devices. I'm Tracy E. Gilchrist. Thanks for being here.